Could please play the introduction video?
For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails, and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
Good morning again. This is the Metro Council meeting, October 26th. We have a quorum. Connor, our clerk, will now call roll for attendance.
Thank you. Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
I believe Councillor Nolan will be joining us shortly. Councillors Gonzalez and President Peterson are excused today, and Deputy Council President Lewis.
Present. Thank you. Before we begin our agenda, could we please play a safety video? It's nice to have a full room.
Hi, I'm Justin Dunlap, and I'm the department head stagehand electrician at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. Safety is a big part of my job. From electrical to stay up to date on the NFPA codes and regulations, to rigging, where we make sure that everything is safely suspended overhead, to egress, ensuring that our audiences, performers, and technicians have the safest possible route in case of emergency. I'm out here at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and you're in the Metro Regional Center. Please note that we're on the 3rd floor of the building. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm now going to open public communication for non-agenda items. Connor, could you please describe to the audience our procedures for public communication today?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll be managing a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting that raise hand button, which, depending on your version of Zoom, is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. If you're joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing that up to me. For those joining us on Zoom, I'll promote you up to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll be able to rejoin, where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. So with that, Deputy Council President Lewis, and for the record, we do have some other items today that folks would like to testify on, so we'll be taking testimony after the staff presentations on those. But for now, Deputy Council President Lewis, I believe we do have one person who signed up in advance to speak in this section, Councillor Anthony Martin. So promote them up. Councillor Martin, you should be able to unmute yourself now, and you'll have 3 minutes. Your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hello all. Thank you so much, Metro Councilors, for your time and for the opportunity to comment on the private transfer station rate review topic you will consider later in your agenda. My name is Anthony Martin. I'm the Council President of the City of Hillsborough. Hillsborough has provided a letter supporting the review of private transfer station rates, but I would like to reiterate the importance of this topic and express our support in moving forward with a review of private transfer station rates. For Hillsborough, as well as many other communities in the region, access to a Metro transfer station is impractical due to drive times and closer available private transfer stations. These private transfer stations do play a critical role in our region's garbage system and support the local collection system that our community members rely on. As the regulator of the local collection system, Hillsborough conducts a detailed annual review of expenses and revenues of our franchise waste haulers in order to set rates for our community. While no one is a fan of rate increases, we can be confident that our rates are transparent, fair, reasonable, and based on the actual cost of operating a collection company. A significant component of our collection rates, almost 25%, is the cost of disposal at these private transfer stations. Hillsborough has experienced increased costs above Metro established rates at these private transfer stations our community relies on. While at first the difference between private rates and Metro rates were small, we've observed a significant difference in these rates over time, often with little to no explanation of the reason for that difference. Currently, that difference in these rates can be almost 20%, depending on load size, once all the transaction and additional fees are factored in. While we recognize there may be different operational costs between private and Metro transfer stations, it is good governance to have clarity of these cost differences so that community members can be assured that the rates they pay for garbage and recycling collection are fair and reasonable. The request for greater transparency and oversight of transfer station rates is something that my community has been requesting for nearly a decade, and something that our council has spoken with many of you about. I strongly encourage you to support moving forward with a new rate review of the private transfer station rates today. Thank you all so much for the time and the work you do on a myriad of issues at Metro.
Thank you, Counselor. See at least one other hand.
Yep. And once again, folks, so I'm going to promote up Matthew Barnett. And once again, we're taking testimony right now on non-agenda items. For our agenda items, we'll take testimony after the staff presentations on them. So Matthew, you should be able to unmute yourself now and turn on your camera. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
For the record, my name is Matthew Barnett. Good morning, Council President, members of the Council. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony today. I am here to express my dissatisfaction with the proposed 2023 Regional Transit Plan. The plan cites goals of mobility, safety, equity, economy, and climate, but the details of the plan do not address these goals. The plan overfunds road and lane expansions while underfunding transit and pedestrian projects. It includes freeway mega projects that will commit our city to car infrastructure. Compared to the 2018 plan, this 2023 plan reduces transit investment and increases roadway expansion. The authors of the plan are aware of induced demand for vehicles and have chosen to continue on with more roads anyway. These road and lane expansions will not address our needs. They will only increase vehicle miles traveled and pave over our city. I call upon the council to reject the 2023 Regional Transit Plan as proposed when the vote is taken at the end of November. And I also call upon the council to demand changes to greatly reduce roadway expansion while increasing transit and pedestrian funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us today.
All right. I'll give folks in our Zoom audience just another second to get their hands up if they would like to testify on non-agenda items. And seeing none, Deputy Council President Lewis.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to close public communication for the non-agenda item portion of our meeting. Move us along in our agenda to consent agenda. Our consent agenda today consists of 4 items. Item 3.1, Resolution 235364 for the purpose of authorizing the Chief Operating Officer to purchase property in the Clackamas River Bluffs and Greenway target areas. 3.2, consideration of September 14, 2023 council meeting minutes. 3.3, consideration of September 28, 2023 council meeting minutes. 3.4, consideration of the October 5, 2023 council meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So move. Second.
There's a motion from Councilor Rosenthal, second from Councilor Simpson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Consent agenda complete. I will move us along to the resolution, item number 4, 235357, for the purpose of accepting the draft Oregon Zoo campus plan concepts. I will note we may have a special call-in live from the zoo today, but I don't think they're ready for us yet. So we're going to keep on track. But this is an important step for the future of our zoo. Our zoo is a leader in animal care and conservation. They've made investments in saving water and energy, and they've made sure that the zoo is welcoming, enjoyable, and it's a place for visitors of all ages and all abilities. It's the top ticketed venue in the entire state for tourism, and it's a place that many kids go to from across the region and look forward to as a recreational outing. Over the past year, the zoo team has engaged stakeholders, visitors, experts, and staff on the priorities for a new campus plan. It would update about 40% of the zoo that was not improved during the 2008 bond measure implementation. And the proposal includes things like modernizing outdated habitats for improved animal care and well-being. We've all been there, but particularly the penguinarium, giraffe area, and the Great Northwest Trail. Greater accessibility on paths and plazas for all people, regardless of ability. Better protection from heat and extreme weather for animals, visitors, and staff. And continuing to improve on our investments in energy and water conservation. We were there September 5th. It was a great tour. Thank you for hosting us. We saw firsthand many of these needs, and we also have all seen how the 2008 bond was transforming the other sections of the zoo. That bond was delivered on time and on budget, and at that work session after our tour, we discussed that the draft campus plan can continue on that legacy. Today, staff are seeking council's acceptance on the concepts in the draft campus plan so that we can begin the important work of applying for permits, going through review, and making sure that the zoo's conditional use permit with the city of Portland is on track. This is one milestone of several, and we will need more work to advance this vision, but today's a big day. We're glad the zoo team is here. We're glad zoo supporters are listening in. So in order to make this a reality, we are gonna potentially take action today. And to hear more about that action, we're gonna hear from staff, including Heidi Ron, our zoo director, and Kristen Solomon, our Senior Capital Program Manager here at Metro.
And Councilor Lewis, our guest, is here now.
Okay, let us take a moment to pause on this. We have a very special opportunity today. Katie McDonald has joined our Zoom. Katie is at the zoo with tribal leaders, elected leaders from the Yakima Nation, and some pumpkins. Katie, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Councilor Lewis. Can you hear us okay?
We can hear you, thank you.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce and then pass off the phone to the folks who are here. So this is Chris Wallahy, a member of the Yakima Nation Tribal Council, Casey Mack Wallahy, a member of the Yakima Nation Tribal Council, and Danella Miller from the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. And they are graciously donating some pumpkins from the Yakima Nation farms to the Oregon Zoo for our Halloween event this weekend. So I don't know if you guys want to go ahead and say anything to folks.
Yes, Shukmaitsky, Wanakshush Yamawit. My name is Casey McWallahy, a member of the Yakima Nation Tribal Council. We picked up the pumpkins yesterday and we delivered them this morning. And, you know, we're just thankful to be helping out on behalf of the Yakima Nation Farms, and the delivery, the donation, you know, help build a partnership. You know, we're just glad to be here.
Shakmaitsky, Christopher Wallahy, Indian name's Takdanam. I just want to share the same sentiments, you know. I'm appreciative of this partnership that's, you know, the strength of this bond that we have, you know, and the pumpkins deliveries, you know, it's just a small part of it, and hopefully that we can have continued relationships down the road. So, yeah, so thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Danella Miller, Umaklai. I'm also a Yakima tribal member, but I work for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. And I'm glad I was in town today where actually have our monthly commission meeting going on, so I was able to participate. And I'm glad to see these ongoing efforts between the Yakima Nation and the zoo. I know we also have a Yakima and Cryptic exhibit with our Pacific lamprey here at the zoo. So glad to keep building and expanding the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Jen.
much for, oh, sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, go ahead. I was just going to pass it back to you.
Thank you so much for being with us. We are a quorum here today. I wish we could be there with you. We have work to do and really appreciate the opportunity to make something work with this Zoom format. But as you mentioned, this is but one piece of a wider tapestry of partnerships and the opportunity for y'all to come forward with pumpkins to celebrate not only the holiday that we're gonna, be able to put on a good show this weekend, but really highlight your tribal enterprise and the ability to really connect all parts of our region and cultures. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the pumpkins, and thank you for your continued spirit of collaboration. Fellow counselors, anything to add?
It's nice to see them with their pumpkins. It's nice to see some produce from the Yakima farms.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. It's really nice to see you over Zoom, and we look forward to seeing you in person in the future. Have a great day.
Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, with that, Heidi, back to you.
What a good introduction.
Live
That was
from
fun.
the zoo. Tell
As
us
if
more
I
about-
planned it.
Tell us more about spooky season this Saturday.
Yeah, we have Halloween happening this Saturday and Sunday at the zoo. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, please head on up to the zoo. Tons of activities, entertainment, palm oil-free candy, and just a really good time for the kids to come out and celebrate, particularly during the daytime for the littles. So head on up and enjoy all the pumpkins that we're now receiving. So thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis and Metro Councilors. I'm here today to present information on the Oregon Zoo's campus planning process. Our goal today is to make sure you understand and can support these concepts, which we touched on during your visit to the zoo last month. I'd like to start by talking briefly about the zoo itself, who we are, what we stand for, what we mean for the region, and how we are helping Northwest wildlife and imperiled species around the world. We survey our visitors weekly. I read every guest comment, so I'm going to sprinkle some of those in throughout today's presentation so you know what we're hearing, what they appreciate, and what they want us to focus on. I want to acknowledge Kristen Solomon, who's here with me today. She's a Senior Capital Project Manager with Metro's Capital Asset Management Department. Kristen has over 20 years of experience in construction and design. She most recently built our Newell Creek and Chehalem Ridge parks, and prior to that was working in affordable housing. And prior to me being the zoo director, I launched our Capital Asset Management Department and oversaw the last round of investments from the 2008 bond to completion. So between the two of us, we have over 30 years of collective construction, design, and project management, and you'll be seeing that today, but we do not do that alone. You'll see a large team behind me. We're drawing on expertise from around the zoo and the industry. Next slide. The zoo's mission is connecting our community to the wonder of wildlife to create a better future for all. I'm going to give you a visitor quote here that I just read last night. As a nanny for over 20 years, and my own years at the zoo as a child, I think it's so very important and fundamental for kids to grow up learning how to protect the amazing animal kingdom. Next slide. We are a hub for science, conservation, education, and animal well-being, delivering the highest quality of care. We have a teaching hospital here. You can see Dr. Carlos, where we train future zoo veterinarians and vet technicians and focus on diversifying the animal health care workforce. Next slide. As part of Metro, we help make the region a great place to call home. We are one of the most visited cultural landmarks in the Pacific Northwest, with more than 1 million visits each year. We inspire guests and community members of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds by creating safe, welcoming spaces. Located in Washington Park, we are part of a community of destinations alongside the Japanese Gardens, International Rose Task Garden, World Forestry Center, and Hoyt Arboretum. Next slide. Through all those tickets and memberships, as well as support from the Oregon Zoo Foundation, we help make a difference for endangered and threatened species. Over the past 30 years, the zoo has teamed up with agencies, tribal partners, nonprofits in our community to restore wildlife here in the Pacific Northwest. Together, we prevented the extinction of the Oregon silver spot butterfly. We were the first in the world to breed the pygmy rabbit, which is harder than it sounds. And through a Head Start and Release program, we tripled the range of the northwestern pond turtle in Washington. We currently have 4 staff members in Borneo right now helping to advance elephant care and species conservation in the wild. Next slide. Perhaps our greatest achievement is our role in bringing back the California condor from the brink of extinction. By 1982, fewer than 30 California condors remained in the world. Today, thanks to the Recovery Partnership, there are now around 560, with more than 300 flying free. At our Johnson Center for Wildlife Conservation in Clackamas County, condors have laid 163 eggs, 109 have hatched, and 85 have been released to sites in Arizona and California. Last year, we were able to support the Yurok tribe in restoring condors to their ancestral homeland in Northern California. Most of those condors were hatched at the Oregon Zoo, and someday soon, we expect those birds will soar over our state too for the first time in 100 years. Next slide. We're also honored to support the Alaka Alliance and their work in bringing the sea otter back to the Oregon coast, where they've been extinct for more than 100 years. Partnerships like this inspire us, proving that we can make a difference in ensuring that our region is a wildlife wonderland for generations to come. I'm going to give you a visitor quote here. The highlight of our visit was watching the sea otters crack the crab snack. The sea otters are the reason I have a zoo membership. Next slide. So what does this all have to do with a campus plan? In a word, everything. Because our aim with this plan is to create a physical manifestation of our mission, a tangible representation of who we are. Through immersive experiences, inspiring wildlife encounters, and powerful conservation storytelling, we want to create connections, spark interest, and foster relationships that will benefit not just our region, but the world. Next slide. It should be noted that we're not starting from scratch. In 2008, voters across the region acted decisively on behalf of animals and conservation when they voted overwhelmingly to make investments in the Oregon Zoo with an emphasis on animal well-being, sustainability, and education. The bond was transformative for the zoo. It provided the impetus for a dramatic overhaul of several of the zoo's most popular animal habitats, including Asian elephants, primates, and polar bears. It also helped ensure that we're providing the highest standard of care in a state-of-the-art veterinary medical center and allowed us to complete an extensive education center with a wide variety of up-close learning opportunities for children and families. The zoo also cut our water usage by almost 60% with the upgrades from the last round of investments. Work on the 2008 bonds investments finished on time and on budget in 2021. All told, the bond transformed 40% of the campus, which is an impact enjoyed by all of our visitors today. Next slide. Over the past 6 months, you've been clear with your direction that the zoo should continue to lead with our conservation efforts and connect our community to educational opportunities for wildlife. It was also important to you that we engage our community in the campus planning process and design a future that reflects where our members, partners, and visitors want us to head. The Metro Council has also been driving policies forward with a focus on climate resilience and sustainability, which is aligned with our work to support wildlife and operate efficiently. And ensuring we are a community hub for all has been a top priority. This shows up not only in our campus plan, but in our guest experience, new education programs, and community partnerships. What we've heard from you aligns with what we've heard from our community. Next slide. Bringing together key stakeholders, we looked at where we've been and where we want to go as an enduring pillar of the Metro region. Our community engagement involved diverse groups of internal and external zoo allies who shared their experiences, opinions, and suggestions to help shape the exciting future of their zoo. It involved more than 2,000 contacts, multiple partner organizations, and in-person engagement sessions with historically marginalized communities. Results across these groups demonstrate that the response to each element of the campus plan has been overwhelmingly positive. We've listed in the staff report many of those groups that we've engaged with. We've also engaged and really relied on our zoo apprenticeship program pictured here. This is our teen internship workforce development program. The zoo's Community Advocacy Council, composed of young professionals of color, zoo volunteers, members, staff, and board of the Oregon Zoo Foundation, and more than 120 zoo employees. Next slide. As part of the planning process, we've come up with design concepts, which we touched on during last month's work session at the zoo. I'm not going to be going over the details as much as we did at that work session, but I do want to review the project zones and show you a few early renderings. Next slide, please. And next slide. At the entry plaza, We want to create a memorable sense of arrival and refresh the plaza experience. We want to keep the great views of the trees and into the mountain goat habitat while expanding guest amenities and providing more shelter from the elements. Next slide. I'm going to start with a quote on this one. This is our Great Northwest area. The Northwest Animal Area is a bottleneck and is extremely crowded. Yes, that is true. The Great Northwest is one of the zoo's most iconic exhibit areas. Surrounded by a native Doug fir forest, this trail replicates the local Northwest watershed, from forest canopy down to underground passageways, from waterfalls down to the bottom of the stream, all while highlighting native species in their habitat. The campus plan proposes to preserve this immersive experience with enhanced accessibility and flow for visitors, providing up-close looks and fostering emotional connections with the wildlife of our region. Over the past 30 years, the zoo's Northwest species recovery efforts have prevented extinctions, expanded populations, advanced conservation science, and formed powerful communities to protect wildlife. Here we hope to highlight some of that work and inspire new generations to act on behalf of wildlife. Next slide. Another of our priorities for renovation would be the marine life area, which includes some of the oldest sections of the zoo. Work here would address aging infrastructure and highlight our sea otter conservation efforts. The Oregon Zoo is home to retired surrogate mom sea otters from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Sea Otter Reintroduction Program. We will continue to play a role in the reintroduction of the sea otter by doing our part to advocate, educate, and provide space for the surrogate parents. This project also removes our oldest habitats, including the current tiger, red panda, and penguin exhibits, which date back to the late 1950s. Next slide. This is a rendering of what our penguinarium could look like. We will be adding outdoor habitat, and that will be great for the visitors and the penguins. The outcomes include more natural habitat, immersive experiences, and being that this is right across from our new education center, an opportunity to directly connect all of the kids and folks that use the education center. I will also call out that the Oregon Zoo is accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. This is the gold standard, and we must meet highest standards for animal care and visitor experience. The Penguinarium was identified as a risk in future accreditation for getting close to not meeting those standards. So they need us to see a plan. Our next accreditation will be in 2026. So we are developing that plan now to be able to upgrade our Penguinarium. I will give you a quote. My only complaint about the zoo would be the penguins. They are my favorite, but I think the exhibit hasn't changed since I was a child. I keep hoping it will get a facelift like so many other exhibits here. Other than that, I love visiting the zoo. Next slide. Situated midway through the guest experience, the South Hub will provide key amenities like restrooms, retail, a play area, first aid, and a sit-down restaurant. The open plaza will serve as a transition zone between the Asia Forest Trail and Africa Savanna, with a focus on comfort, seating, canopy trees for shade, and our sprawling lawn. Next slide. Other new spaces here would include a herpetarium and a tropical house to highlight a more diverse collection of reptiles, amphibians, birds, bats, and other small mammals. These buildings would complement plans to expand aging habitats in other areas of the zoo and would provide guests with more indoor viewing opportunities. Next slide. Redevelopment of the existing Africa zone with new savanna exhibits for giraffe and black rhinos, new holding buildings, and year-round viewing. This is an important upgrade also needed to meet future AZA accreditation standards. The Tropical Forest building will house a walk-through aviary and diverse plant collection, showcasing the biodiversity of the African rainforest. A walking trail will connect the African forest and lowland savanna zones, featuring new exhibits for lions, painted dogs, and primates. Next slide. The new campus plan is a significant opportunity to advance the Metro Council's goals for equity, accessibility, and economic vitality in one of Metro's most beloved, visible, public serving properties. It aligns the zoo's long-range vision with policies adopted by the Metro Council, including the strategic plan to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, the Clean Air Construction Program, Construction Careers Pathways, and Equity and Contracting. Next slide. This slide shows you a timeline of the campus planning process. We want to make sure that you know how we will be moving forward, and the stars denote Metro Council review or action. Starting on the left, we began developing the plan in 2022. Throughout this year, we've compiled internal and external feedback, including council work sessions in May and September, which brings us to today, when we're hopeful you will accept these concepts, for submitting to the City of Portland for land use permitting review. Then in the spring, we will have an updated plan to discuss with you with a cost estimate, plans for phasing construction, and a business and operating plan. That's also when we can expect approval from the City of Portland on conditional use master plan. And finally, one beautiful day next summer, we would seek council approval of the finalized campus plan. In a way, of course, that would only be the beginning, because the campus plan would serve as a roadmap for future design and construction. Next slide. The Oregon Zoo campus will be designed to positively contribute to human and environmental well-being, to conserve natural resources, and to lead and inspire sustainability practices by guests, community organizations, and businesses. We aim to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions from operations and prioritize actions that contribute to reduce regional greenhouse gas emissions. To do this, we will reduce our energy demand. We will prioritize strategies that contribute to regional grid decarbonization. We will consider the climate impacts of a building through its entire life cycle and minimize the urban heat island effect. Next slide. While we've been updating our campus plan to reflect our vision for the future, we also rolled out a new mission, brand, and logo to better align with who we are and where our community wants us to focus. We will leave you with a video. Please enjoy.
I knew I always loved animals.
I always knew I wanted to work with animals.
I mean, my mom's obsessed with.
I'll just wait for the share screen on our main screens to come up here. If we could bring up the Zoom shared screen on the screens in the room, please.
I knew I always loved animals.
I always knew I wanted to work with animals.
I mean, my mom's obsessed with the zoo, so I've been coming to the zoo since before I was born.
Teenage Heidi had her bedroom plastered with dolphin posters.
I was always the kid finding local wildlife, and unfortunately for my parents, I would then bring them all home.
My favorite animal.
I'm definitely partial to reptiles.
Rhinos. They're like safe boxes with legs.
I like the porcupine because my husband says I'm like a porcupine. Don't make me mad.
I think that the first reaction when you see an animal as big as an elephant and you think, how is that possible? You get inspired to protect that.
Yeah, it is fun to see the polar bears playing in our pools, but there is a message behind, and the message is we need to protect the planet.
The Oregon Zoo has been a leader in conservation for about 30 years. We play this role both locally in the Pacific Northwest as well as globally.
So we raise western pond turtles until they're old enough to evade predators. It's really contributing a lot to local wildlife.
We have been able to bring California condors back from virtual extinction.
We also facilitated conservation science projects with polar bears to learn things about their wild counterparts.
I actually have my dream job, trying to bring sea otters back to the Oregon coast, and they've been my favorite animal since I was 5.
I think the zoo had a huge part in my love for environmental education.
You know, you got kids coming here, we have the education center to be able to impact kids and to bridge that gap of animals and conservation and how we can bring that to like little ears.
Why I love the Oregon Zoo so much is it's the community involvement.
It is a community hub.
It's a lot about connection. It's connection to family, it's connection to nature or wildlife.
We're bringing kids in from communities that may not have that much opportunity to come to the zoo.
Access to me means looking out and seeing the true community.
It is because of our community that we have a world-class zoo with new habitats, with amazing animals, and really with some of the best zoo staff in the country.
If I've talked to somebody to say, oh, it's been a long time since I've been at the zoo, I'm like, oh, well, it's changed quite a bit.
The mission is becoming much more centered on conservation and education.
Together for Wildlife means that we can't go it alone.
You know, we are all together in this planet.
Humans will not be able to exist if wildlife doesn't exist. And how do we protect what we have now?
We can all work together to make choices and investments that create a better future for wildlife.
When we look at what we can do with these local species that were on the edge of extinction, we can actually make a difference. And the Oregon Zoo is really leading the charge.
Together for wildlife.
Together for wildlife.
Oregon Zoo, together for wildlife.
Together.
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 Together for wildlife. Thank you. We take great pride in having one of the most beautiful and progressive zoos in the country, and we need to continue investing in that and our future. We hope to get your feedback today as we seek your approval on the concepts for the next phase, what your priorities and policies and how they're reflected, and how we can explore financing this plan. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a fantastic video. And thank you, Heidi and Kristen, for being here. On behalf of a really large team, actually, some of whom are in the room and some of who I see in the attendee list on Zoom. Y'all are our two voices, but so many folks have made this possible. When you say 2,000 contacts, that is a lot for a planning process. And I was able to be part of one of those charrettes, and it was just magnificent, the scope and the depth that we were able to cover. Counselors, we do have at least one card turned in on this item. Do you want to hear public comment, and then we'll do our discussion? Stay up here for questions, please. Public comment, Connor, please.
Yes, thank you. So we do have public comments. So we have Susan Hartnett. So Susan, feel free to take any of these two seats. So Susan, you'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good morning, Deputy Council President Lewis. A lot of words there, and other counselors. Good morning. My name is Susan Hartnett, and today I'm here to share a little bit of history from the 2008 Oregon Zoo Bond Citizens Oversight Committee. I believe that you all know that the 2008 Oregon Zoo Bond required a citizen oversight committee, and that the committee provided an annual report to Metro Council each year. As the committee chair, when the bond program was wrapping up, I was pleased to present the final report to the committee in November 2021. If any of you have not seen this, it was on your website. If it's gone, I have a copy and I'd be happy to share it with you. When I came to present that, I was really happy to start my testimony by saying, quote, "The committee once again affirms that the bond funds have been spent wisely, bond projects were advanced on schedule and within budget, and the bond program delivered on voter expectations." For clarity, that statement covered the entire 13 years from the bond's approval by voters to its completion, and included all of the projects undertaken using bond funds. I'm here today to remind everyone of one of the committee's final recommendations to Metro Council. It said, and I quote, "The committee recommends that the zoo update its comprehensive capital master plan to define the needs of the remaining aged habitats and facilities, and that Metro Council begin thinking about funding options for the improvements necessary to address those needs, continuing with the focus on animal welfare, conservation, education, and sustainability." After hearing that wonderful report on the draft Oregon Zoo campus plan, it's clear that great progress has been made on the first part of that recommendation. And I am here to urge you to approve the resolution before you to keep that momentum going. And I would also mention that I too had the opportunity to participate in several of the community outreach events. And I wanted to comment that they were very thoughtfully planned and really offered a real opportunity to provide input and feedback to the process and to the outcomes. And I really appreciate that's not always how you feel when you go to those planning events. Nonetheless, I do want to point out that the second part of that recommendation, the exploration of funding options, still needs some attention. So I would also urge the council to begin that work as soon as possible. And I would also point out that it doesn't really have to wait until the city approves the conditional use master plan. That process will not exclude anything that is proposed in the plan. And having worked for the city of Portland for many years, I know that to be a fact. And that's all I have today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming with your testimony and for all the time you put into chairing a committee of Metro. Your service is appreciated. Okay, colleagues, anybody have any questions for our panel? Any,
Yep,
Yep.
I got one.
Counselor Simpson?
Thank you, Heidi, for your presentation. Always thrilled to see good things happening at the zoo. It is such a jewel for our region and our state. Really more of a comment. I want to thank you for incorporating our thoughts and comments from our tour visit the last round when we had our council meeting there. And it was really eye-opening to really understand the needs and challenges that, that remaining 60% that need to be done or improved at the zoo. So my hat goes off to you again, the robust engagement that you all undertook, the engagement points. I mean, you did your job when folks in East County are talking about the work that y'all are doing. And so you're making sure that they're not left behind or forgotten or not a part of that conversation. So thank you so much. Really love what I'm seeing here and hoping we can get this done for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Rosenthal?
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Yeah, I also want to echo what Counselor Simpson said. I've appreciated my association with the zoo and the Zoo Foundation and my abilities to do there. I don't have small kids, so I don't get there on that basis, but I've enjoyed all my times at the zoo. I think it's doing great things. One of the things I was in reading through the resolution, I was noticed it didn't really mention the AZA. I know we recently passed AZA with quite flying colors, but they still had some points that they wanted to raise. So my question is, you mentioned the penguins. Are there other areas, I'm assuming that this update of the zoo will address their other concerns. Are there other particular areas that you would mention that they want to deal with?
Sure. And I will just start with that. Association of Zoos and Aquarium standards continue to change. Every year, new standards are updated. So part of the whole thing is not just looking at, piece by piece, but collectively, where are they going and what is best practice? And how do we continue to lead the pack in that arena? So while there were some specific findings in that report, they were really around the penguinarium and the giraffe holding. Our giraffe indoor habitat can only hold 2 giraffes, and you wouldn't want them there for an extremely long duration. We want to build a larger giraffe holding, but also indoor, outdoor. Giraffes have a certain temperature that their bodies have to be kept at, so we need a more climate resilient facility that supports, our changing weather patterns here for many of the species. So giraffe needs an update. The penguinarium will be at risk of meeting future standards around just the aesthetics and the experience, although the penguins are doing great. And then the family farm was identified as somewhat looking a little bit outdated. And at the time they came, the engagement was limited. But we've since stepped that up and added much more activity in that zone. So I would say those are some of the 3 zones currently. But they are also changing standards around ambassador animals. Ambassador animals include our Wildlife Live show and just really those that our staff bring up close and engaging. And those standards will change, we think, over the next 5 years. And we're trying to get ahead of that in order to be able to meet them. I just also learned that we are sponsoring a PhD student at PSU who will be studying best welfare practices in design for both ambassador animals and reptiles that we will then incorporate into the future design of the updated habitats.
Thanks.
Counselor Wong?
Thank you, Deputy President. Thank you, Heidi, and the whole team for all your great work. Just really love going to the zoo and taking part in all the zoo lights and concerts and everything. It's just a real asset for our region. This council has been really thinking about kind of our strategic targets in upcoming years and, setting that vision for, our region. And Deputy President Lewis mentioned that the zoo is the largest ticketed venue in Oregon. And I'm wondering if you might also be able to touch upon some of the other economic benefits that the zoo brings to our community. I understand there was some great contracting and support of emerging minority contractors in the previous iteration. And I'm just wondering, as we think about economic growth in our region, how might this process support our vision in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Actually, I was reading some former reports, and I was reminded that at one point during the construction of Elephant Lands, we had 700 contractors on site at once, individuals. It was a very busy site,
And that relates to jobs and the impact that we can have when we're making these investments on the metro policies around construction careers and equity and contracting. So the last round of zoo bond investments did achieve the Metro Council's goals at that time around COVID contracting. Now we're looking at diversifying the workforce, and we've set up the tools to do so. And I think we'll see much bigger impact on that during the next round of investments. Our economic impact report is about to be released. We have an over $80 million annually impact on the region in terms of the folks that come to the zoo, visit the zoo, come to town, or just spend time there, and all of the jobs and the supply chain that we also invest in. So we have a significant focus there. I will say though too, the stories people tell us about how they got through COVID with kids and having a safe place to get outside and immerse yourself with animals and nature, and just being that location that they could go to. We were kind of a saving grace for a lot of families in that period. So continuing to be an amazing treasure and having something really positive in the region is the role we play and wanting to continue moving forward with.
Thank you. And I don't know if a data point exists, but do you have like a public return on investment type figure? Like for every public dollar we spend, we're
I don't have
contributing
that specific. I can tell you it takes about $140,000 a day to run the zoo, and therefore we need a lot of investment to keep it going and keep bringing people in and making sure we're meeting their needs and what they want to see from their zoo.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, colleagues. I think it's really important to recognize the importance of the zoo to the region, both as a place that families can go and as a economic driver, as my colleague was mentioning, but also want to really highlight the real conservation science. To be able to drive down to Northern California and visit with the Yurok tribe and see them actually be able to release condors that wouldn't be released if but for our work, that was an incredibly powerful experience. Condors are really big, and then I think of one of the smallest little critters, the western pond turtle, and the work being done here, just a quick drive into the gorge to release little pond turtles that are underappreciated for their role in the ecosystem. So really appreciate the real conservation science, but also want to underscore the importance of the foundation partnership. We're lucky to have Oregon Zoo Foundation as such a seamless partner, making sure that when we have something that's a capital improvement, oftentimes we get an extra layer of program improvement on top of it. When I've visited other zoos, you can't walk 5 steps without stepping on a brick that's sponsored or labeled or branded. I think something really special about our zoo is it is the Oregon Zoo, and we have made a public commitment to funding it for the members of our region, for visitors, without that kind of reliance. So really excited to continue on that train as we are looking to the future and future funding potential. But I do think that the habitats that you mentioned today, the ability to help people get around of all abilities, all of that is super critical, and feel particularly moved to be at this juncture where the star is kind of on the left side of the Gantt chart, even though it feels like we're at the right side. Mm-hmm. So completion of a great process, but so much more to come. Colleagues, with that, I would take a motion on 235357, the draft concept for the zoo concept plan.
So moved.
Second.
With the motion from Councilor Simpson and a second from Councilor Rosenthal. Connor, could you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis. And I'll just note for the record as well that Councilor Nolan has joined us now. So Councilor Rosenthal.
Yay.
Councilor Simpson.
Yes.
Councilor Wong.
Aye.
Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
And Deputy Council President Lewis.
Aye. Passes with unanimous approval. Thank you, team. Big moment.
Thank you for your support. Zoo Lights tickets are on sale.
Okay, with that, let us move on in our agenda. Today, item 5.1 is ordinance 23-1503 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Chapter 7.05, Income Tax Administration, and 7.06, personal income tax to add certain clarifications and make housekeeping updates. Here with us today, Josh Harwood, our fiscal tax policy advisor, and Justin Lobster, our tax compliance program manager, who will help present this ordinance.
Thank you. From turtles to taxes. Well, I'm going to shift to Marisa real quick first.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning, Deputy Council President Lewis and councilors. I get to make the fun part of this announcement this morning, which is that this tax will now be included on TurboTax for electronic filers. As you recall, that was a huge issue that they had not integrated our tax payment into their software, and for the next tax year, we will be included. So, yes, very exciting news, and so I get to now hand it over for some other housekeeping.
Now for the fun part. Just for the record, I'm Josh Howard. I'm the Fiscal and Tax Policy Advisor here at Metro. With me is Justin Labshire, the Tax Compliance Program Manager, and we're here to do 3 minor code changes to our income tax codes. And these are either to provide some direction or clarification around confusion that taxpayers or tax preparers had, or to provide tools to our tax administrator to enforce these taxes and to make them more efficient in their collection. So I'll turn it over to Justin to provide a little more detail.
Yes, thank you, Deputy President Lewis and councilors. For the record, my name is Justin Lobster, Tax Compliance Program Manager. And yeah, it's going to be difficult to top the penguins and giraffes and polar bears, but we're happy to be here today to discuss one ordinance involving changes to 3 code chapter sections related to the SHS taxes. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The first of which is an e-filing mandate. This legislation would require certain tax preparers to file tax returns electronically. The purpose is simple. We'd like to expedite processing of returns and refunds while decreasing data entry errors. These rules would allow the administrator to phase in the requirement in a manageable manner that accommodates not only taxpayers, but tax preparers, the tax software vendors, and administrator resources. It's Metro's intent to implement these requirements uniformly with all 3 divisions, beginning with the 2024 tax year. Those would be returns due in April of 2025. Next slide, please. Our second item are employer penalties for incorrect withholding. Our administrator, City of Portland, has observed a pattern of employers submitting end-of-year reporting. Later in the following year, the business will amend their prior year numbers that fail to include the necessary corrected forms, W2Cs. This is a situation where neither the code nor rules specify employers must submit accurate annual W-2s, and the administrator is lacking a tool to enforce this request on employers. This code update fills the gap, requiring accurate and complete W-2s be filed, number 1, when the year-end reconciliation is due, and additionally, when the return is amended at risk of penalty. Next slide, please. Now, our final item clears up some confusion regarding pass-through entity deductions. A pass-through entity, which I'll refer to as a PTE for short, refers to a business that does not pay any income tax of its own. Its income, losses, credits, and deductions all pass through to each business owner's personal return. Current Metro Personal Income Tax Code allows a deduction for previously taxed income from PTEs. However, the code and rules do not provide clarity for all tax situations, and the tax professional community is seeking guidance specific to use of a PTE business's net operating loss on the personal income tax return of its owners. Accordingly, staff considered options and determined the best course of action was codifying the allowance of a deduction for a pass-through net operating loss with conditions to ensure there are no scenarios for either a double deduction or double taxation. Next slide. And yeah, this concludes my summary of the proposed updates. We are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Where's your video?
So many opportunities for videos, yes, in Texas. We'll work on that.
Colleagues, questions? Councilor Rosenthal.
Just one question. Can you give me a few words on the nature of the penalties that will be added to this?
Yes, for the employer withholding,
Right.
the penalty would be $50 per each missing or incomplete W-2. However, the penalties can be cumulative in addition to any other penalties within the section. And the administrator has full discretion to waive penalties for good cause or reasonable action.
It's a relatively minor penalty, Counselor, but it's there as a tool for the administrator just to have a carrot or have a stick a little bit to make sure that employers are providing corrected W-2s.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Connor, could you please move us to our public hearing?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis. So if anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 23-1503, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage the timer to go off of the 3-minute mark. Once again, if you have not signed up to speak in advance, you can do so now, either by hitting the raise hand button on Zoom or by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room if you're here in person. And for those joining on Zoom, to allow you to turn on your cameras, I will be promoting you to a full Zoom panelist. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll rejoin as a panelist where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody speaking today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, Deputy Council President Lewis, councilors, we have not had anybody sign up in advance. And I'll just give folks another second or two to get their hands up, either virtually or physically, and seeing none.
So seeing no testimony on ordinance 23-1503, I will close the public hearing. And our second reading, council consideration and vote are scheduled for November 9th, 2023. Thank you. I'm going to move us along in our agenda to 5.2, which is ordinance 23-1502 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 23.71 acres located on the north side of Northeast Evergreen Road, east of Northeast 30th, and west of Northeast Star Boulevard. I would ask our Metro Attorney, Karen McLaren, to please guide us on the procedural requirements.
Thank you, Deputy Council. Deputy Councilor Lewis. Play microphone on.
No, could you hit the button, Carrie? My panel isn't working today.
Is it on now?
Not yet.
And no.
I think Maurice's mic is, oh, now you're on.
Oh, okay, thank you. I guess I need to push that button harder. Thank you, councilors. Because this annexation involves a land use application that requires a quasi-judicial hearing, there are some additional procedural requirements that must be addressed. First, council members must declare a conflict of interest or ex parte contact prior to the staff presentation. If a councilor has a conflict of interest, they are not allowed to participate in the council discussion or vote on that application. If a councilor has had an ex parte contact, they must declare the substance of it on the record, and it is subject to rebuttal. Discussions with Metro staff are not considered ex parte contacts. Councilors will be asked to declare any conflict of interest or an ex parte contact after I describe additional procedural requirements. For quasi-judicial hearings of this type, Oregon land use statutes require that I provide the following statements of the required procedures. Under Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code, this type of annexation into the Metro District boundary must be initiated by petition, which must be reviewed and acted on by the council following a public hearing. Public testimony at this hearing should only address the applicable approval criteria. The approval criteria are set forth in Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code and are more specifically identified in the staff report, which is part of the packet of the materials before council today. The decision of the council is final, although it can be challenged by filing a notice of intent to appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the final decision. If any person fails to raise an issue in person during the hearing or by letter, or fails to provide sufficient evidence to allow the council to respond to an issue, that issue may not be the basis for an appeal to LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to give the council an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court under ORS 197.796. I will now go over the hearing procedures. First, Metro staff will present a short report. The staff report will describe the proposal, identify the applicable approval criteria, and summarize the staff recommendation. The applicant may then make a presentation in support of their application. Following the applicant's presentation, other persons in support of the application will be given the opportunity to speak. Opponents of the application, if any, will then have the opportunity to speak, and the applicant may then rebut any testimony from opponents. After that, public testimony will be closed. After the record is closed to all parties, council members may discuss the request and ask questions of staff. A council vote will not be held until after the second reading. This hearing is part of the official record. If anyone is testifying, please speak specifically about this application and how the criteria relate to the request. Please submit a copy of any written testimony, and we will maintain that as part of the record in this matter. That concludes my overview.
Thank you. So the case matter being reviewed is proposed ordinance 23-1502 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 23.71 acres located on the north side of Northeast Evergreen Road, east of Northeast 30th, and west of Northeast Star. Do any members have ex parte contacts to disclose? No. No's. Do any council members have a conflict of interest to declare?
No.
No. So I will now ask Glenn Hamburg, our regional planner, to introduce the ordinance.
Yeah, good morning, council. Glenn Hamburg, he, him pronouns, and I'm an associate regional planner in the Planning, Development, and Research Department. And to not be too repetitive, I'll hit on some of the highlights and then address the approval criteria per usual. So as already noted, this proposal, if adopted, would annex to the Metro District boundary approximately 23.71 acres in the area of Hillsborough. It's located on the north side of Northeast Evergreen Road, approximately north of the Hillsborough Airport, if that gives you a sense. The property is already inside of the Hillsborough city limits and is planned by the city for industrial use. And so this measure would, if adopted, allow for that urban development, industrial development to occur. So as normal, there are three criteria that we consider in an application for annexation to the Metro District. The first is the subject territory in the urban growth boundary? The territory is indeed in the urban growth boundary. The area was added to the urban growth boundary back in 2005. The second criterion is the territory needs to be subject to measures that prevent its urbanization until the territory is annexed to a city or to service districts that will provide necessary urban services. So as I've stated, the territory is already in the city of Hillsborough. It was annexed to the city in 2022, last year. The final criterion is that the proposed boundary change is consistent with any applicable cooperative or urban services agreements. And indeed, the proposal is the urban services would be provided both by the city of Hillsborough and by Clean Water Services. So we sent notice of the application to nearby property owners, to interested parties. We post a notice of the annexation on site and we run a notice in the newspaper. We've received no comments or questions about the proposal. And given that the proposal meets the criteria, staff recommend its approval. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, any questions? Councilor Wong?
Great, thank you. Just out of curiosity, for this industrial land, do you have any inkling on what the future use might be?
I would hate to guess, but I'll note that the applicant is Stack Infrastructure, and at least according to their website, Stack Infrastructure has things like data centers. But what ultimately might be developed there will be determined by the city of Hillsborough and the property owners consistent with their rules.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Beautiful, concise presentation. I'm gonna move us on to our public hearing. Public hearing for ordinance 23-1502 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District approximately 23.71 acres located on the north side of Northeast Evergreen Road, east of Northeast 30th, and west of Northeast Star Boulevard. Connor, could you please describe to the audience the procedures for public hearing?
Yes, thank you. So if anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 23-1502, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. If you are joining us on Zoom, you can sign up now by hitting the raise hand button. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button may be at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those joining on Zoom, I'll promote you up to a full panelist. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll rejoin and you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record. So with that, Deputy Council President Lewis, councilors, we have not had anybody sign up in advance to speak on this item. So I'll just give folks another couple of seconds in our Zoom or physical audience to put their hands up for testifying on this item.
Okay,
And seeing none.
Public hearing on ordinance 23-1502 is open. Seeing no one raising their hands, I will now close the public hearing. And second reading, council consideration and vote are scheduled for November 16th, 2023. Okay, I'm gonna move us along to the item on our agenda of other business. Item 6, oh, thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, no problem, thanks.
Item 6.1, private facility rate transparency. During the creation of the 23-24 budget, we directed the Waste Prevention Environmental Services Department to provide ongoing technical education about fees and regional waste priorities to inform future council direction to the annual budget and regional waste fee setting process. During the last budget and fee setting, cities and counties elevated the issue of rates charged at private stations. Local governments began expressing concern in 2010 as rates at private facilities began to exceed rates at public stations. And this work session is the opportunity for Metro Council to get an update. And we have staff with us today who are gonna give us a presentation. And then we get to provide some guidance to staff on whether council would like to proceed with the transfer system configuration policy adopted in 2016. I'm going to begin by introducing Marta McGuire, our Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Director, Jenna Jones, our State and Regional Affairs Advisor, and Holly Sternkorb, please correct me, our Principal Planner on this project.
Good morning, Deputy Council President Lewis and councilors. Thank you so much for the opportunity to engage with you today. As Deputy Council President Lewis mentioned, we are here today to provide you an update on the rate transparency work to date and request guidance on proceeding with formal consideration of a resolution to direct staff to conduct a cost of service study of the rates charged at private transfer stations. Over the last month, we've had a number of discussions with you on the regional waste plan and your priorities and goals for the garbage and recycling system. One key goal that this discussion centers on is advancing the adoption of rates that are reasonable, regionally consistent, responsive to user economic needs, and well understood. As a part of the budget and fee development last year, we received feedback from stakeholders, including the concerns over rate transparency and cost of service raised by cities and counties, and also mentioned at in the testimony at the beginning of this meeting. We also heard concerns from private transfer stations on comparing the cost of private station rates with publicly run stations, and the comparison of these costs being apples to oranges. This is coupled with issues that we've had in discussions with you, including rate sensitivities and concerns concerns over affordability. From a department perspective, we see the cost of service study that we will discuss today as an opportunity to address these concerns and as an opportunity to ensure that we have good data to inform our program and policy development. There is a draft resolution attached in the meeting materials, but no formal action is requested at today's meeting. If council agrees that a cost of service study is a good next step, then staff would bring forward the resolution at a future meeting for a formal vote. So if we go to the next slide, just a quick overview of what we'll cover today. Holly's going to walk through our current policy framework to provide some background, and then we will share the staff recommendation on the study, and we'll have some time for discussion. So with that, I will turn it over to Holly.
Good morning, Council. Appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you today. There are, go ahead and advance the slide. There are two major policies in place that address rates charged by private transfer stations. The first, as Marta mentioned, is the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, specifically Goal 14, which includes actions to advance rate transparency and make sure rates are regionally consistent and well understood. The other policy is the 2016, is the transfer system configuration policy that was adopted by Council in 2016. That policy includes a number of programs and policies to ensure that the transfer system in the region provides maximum public good. A couple of those policies and programs, first of all, is an approach to ensure transparency of rates charged by all transfer stations. And the second is a policy to allocate a percentage of the region's wet waste tons to private transfer stations. And that is in recognition of the valuable service that those private transfer stations provide to the region in terms of their geographic location. So for the next few slides, I'm going to talk through the work done to date to implement these policies and the outcomes. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. The first policy I'm going to talk about is an approach to ensure that transparency of rates charged at private transfer stations. A couple of things that are important to note as I walk through this timeline is, first of all, Metro does not regulate rates at privately owned transfer stations. However, the agency does have the authority to do so if Metro Council determines that it's in the public's interest. The second is that the lack of rate transparency, the fact that rates are not well understood and it's not possible to determine if rates charged are reasonable based on cost of service, is not a new issue. You've heard from local governments today. I believe you've received some letters from local governments, and the local governments began to express transparency concerns back in 2010 when rates at private transfer stations began to exceed rates at the public stations. Local governments are concerned that the rates charged are too high and that these rates, which are passed on to residential and commercial customers, may not be representative of cost of service. Essentially, some of our local government partners in certain parts of the region are concerned that their citizens are paying more for the same services. So to address this concern, Metro Council established a step-based approach to improve rate transparency as part of the transfer system configuration policy. The approach has 3 steps. To date, Metro has implemented 2 of those steps. The first one was in 2017. Metro estimated the costs at the public transfer stations, and we published those costs to serve as a benchmark for local governments to help set collection rates. Not long after we published that report, local governments asked us to move to step 2 of the rate transparency process. And then the reason for that is that the estimates of the public stations were not sufficient in understanding costs at private transfer stations. The services that are provided at the 2 types of stations, public and private, are different. The public stations provide public services that are important to our residential and commercial customers, including self-haul. And in order to provide these public-facing services, the stations are open longer hours and for more days. Our private transfer stations also offer very valuable services to the region. It's just that the services are different and the costs cannot always be compared. So in 2019, Metro moved to step 2 and released a report that estimated the costs at private transfer stations. The estimates were developed based on site visits to private transfer stations and interviews with key operating staff. A model was created to develop the estimates based on this publicly available data and assumptions. But the estimates did not include an analysis of actual financial data or actual costs. I want to note that there are limitations to modeling costs. Mainly, it's that models tend to gloss over very meaningful differences between the transfer stations, such as the difference between a vertically integrated company and a non-vertically integrated company. Page 4 of the report that estimated the cost lists this limitation as well as some others. Again, after the release of the report, local governments requested that Metro move to step 3 of the rate transparency process, which is to conduct a full rate review, a full cost of service study in order to understand the costs and rates charged at private transfer stations. And here we are today in 2023, and as you know, this lack of rate transparency remains an issue. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The second policy to oversee rates at private transfer stations is the goals-based tonnage allocation program. As I stated earlier, as part of the transfer system configuration policy, Council directed staff to design a transparent method to allocate a percentage of the region's wet waste tons to the private transfer stations, again, in recognition of the valuable service they provide based on their geographic location. Following adoption of the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, Metro Council directed staff to incentivize progress towards meeting 5 Regional Waste Plan goal areas through a goals-based wet waste tonnage allocation program. With this approach, which is now fourth year, transfer stations receive an annual base tonnage allocation, and if they apply for and meet criteria for goals-based tonnage, they receive additional allocations. One of those 5 regional waste plan goals is Goal 14, which advances the adoption of rates that are reasonable, regionally consistent, and well understood. The incentive is designed to encourage the private transfer stations to advance rate affordability and consistency by charging rates that are no more than Metro's garbage disposal fee. You can go to the next slide. Implementation of the current policies to oversee rates at private transfer stations have not resulted in rates that are regionally consistent or well understood. The steps that Metro has taken to improve rate transparency at private transfer stations have provided us with estimates, but we need to fact check those with actual detailed cost data. Currently, as I said, Metro and jurisdictional partners do not have sufficient information to understand rates charged by private transfer stations or determine if rates are reasonable based on cost of service. Moving to step 3 of the rate transparency process and conducting a full cost of service study will provide us the detailed cost information that's needed to understand rates charged. The voluntary incentives, the second policy that I referenced, the voluntary incentives offered by the goals-based tonnage allocation program have also not been successful in incentivizing private transfer stations to charge rates that are no more than Metro's garbage disposal fee. In 2022 and 2023, several private transfer stations opted not to meet Metro's rate, and as a result opted not to receive the additional tonnage allocations. In 2022, 3 transfer stations opted out, and this year 4 transfer stations opted out. As a result, rates currently charged are not regionally consistent. In 2022, rates charged ranged from slightly below Metro's fee to as much as 15% above Metro's fee for an average load size of 8 tons. This year, 2023, rates range from slightly below Metro's fee to as much as 6% above Metro's fee.
Next slide. And for the record, my name is Jenna Jones. I'm the State and Regional Affairs Advisor. Happy to be here today. And I know if you're not looking at me, it's probably because I'm blinding you with this hot pink suit, so I'm sorry. But I wanted to go over a couple more reasons of why a cost of service study may be necessary or moving from step 3 from step 2, as Holly kind of walked through where we're at as a process. I think the first one you'll hear from some of our local government partners is it's good governance. And I want to say that this is not a new thing in the solid waste system. It may be new to Metro, but our city and county partners do cost of service studies with their haulers. And now the DEQ is now doing it at the state level with material recovery facilities or MRFs. So this has been done before. There are ways to do it and design a system that works to do a cost of service study. It's just, whenever we decide or try to uncover some of the books, people go a little uneasy about it. So we can be like the rest of our government partners if we choose to do a cost of service study, and that would be a way that we could justify some of the rates that are leading to disposal at our private transfer stations for wet waste. Right now, when the local jurisdictions do their cost of service study, they are seeing that one of the costs that is like exponentially growing is the cost of disposal. If you read the City of Cornelius's letter, that was one of those things, and I think their city manager may say something later to how big of that impact is. The next one is better data, better transparency, and better decisions. The WPES department has been in front of you all a lot this month, because there are a lot of big decisions coming down the pike when it comes to the systems facility plan, when it comes to the Recycling Modernization Act, and even what is the future of the goal-based tonnage allocation program will likely be coming back to you at a later date. And so in order to inform all of those decisions, we need to know what the private transfer stations are actually charging so it can inform Metro Council decisions. I think one of the things that Holly touched on a little bit, but I'll put a finer point on, is with the goals-based tonnage allocation, we are asking providers or transfer station operators to meet Metro's rate so that they can get extra tons. We've heard from industry over and over that you can't compare the public transfer station to the private transfer station. It's not apples to apples. So now we need to do a full in-depth look of just the private transfer stations to see what makes sense in their realm of what rates could be. The next part of this is if you made our region into a triangle, each corner of our region is impacted by some of the transfer stations who do not meet Metro's rate. That's in Forest Grove, in Gresham and Troutdale, and also in Wilsonville. So it spans across our region. The next reason that a cost of study may be necessary is it'd be keeping promises to our local government partners. As Holly mentioned, concerns from our local government partners started a decade ago, actually more than a decade ago in 2010. So it's been a long time. We've different iterations of Metro Council prior to you, and you all now have been asked to move and look more critically at private transfer station rates. And then lastly, there are impacts to business and residential customers. And so based on how much a private transfer station charges, someone might decide to go to dispose of at a different transfer station, adding transportation costs, things like that, and then also getting passed on to their ratepayers. So our staff recommendation here today is please invite us back so that we can talk about adopting a resolution that would help us move to step 3, which would be doing a cost of service study. I will let Holly talk about more in depth of what that could look like if Metro Council wishes to move on. But before that, last week at RWAC, Holly presented and gave them the same staff recommendation in a very similar presentation. And I'm happy to report that all of our local government and community partners on the Regional Waste Advisory Committee were supportive of proceeding with a cost of service study. One point that really stood out to me was Goal 14 says that we need responsive, reasonable rates that are well understood, and we don't well understand them yet. And so for a baseline, we need to find out what is actually contributing to the rate so we can build on that foundation so we can at least say they're well understood, and then we can make them more responsive or reasonable. That can be a different policy lever. Also, at the Regional Waste Advisory Committee last week, I do want to note that the industry representative on the committee expressed concerns about the ability to keep sensitive business information confidential. We know that is a big concern within the industry, like across private transfer stations, and I think we will be able to find a way to keep it confidential. Holly will tell you what that is in a moment, but also because it's been done before in many different jurisdictions. And then information about why costs may result in differences from Metro's fee was shared by both industry representatives on the committee and a private transfer station owner. during public comment and really kind of explained it's not apples to apple public and private transfer stations. So again, to prove that statement, we have to be able to look at more data. And then the private transfer station owner, who also provided public comment at the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, shared some of the impacts that kind of tied in that goal-based tonnage allocation to their rates and what matching Metro's rate does and impacts them when, like, to do a rate of return or the ability to invest in their facility improvements in the future. So it does have impacts that our private transfer station owners are balancing when they go for our goal-based tonnage allocation. So I want to really give that some airtime here. So as I said, our staff recommendation is for us to come back, for you all to consider as Metro Council a resolution to move to step 3, which is a cost of service study on the private transfer stations. And Holly will give you a little bit more details on what that looks like.
So if council wishes to continue with a cost of service study, Metro staff would convene industry, local government, and community with an independent third party to develop the cost of service study design. So everybody will be at the table. We very much need our partners' input in how to design the cost of service study. The operators of all 6 transfer stations will be invited to participate. We recognize that each transfer station is different. We also recognize that each one is equally important to this region. Our local government and community partners will also be at the table because we recognize we've got to balance the impacts to our industry partners with the overall public good and rate transparency. As Jenna said, we understand that confidentiality of industry business data is important. And we will develop confidentiality and data security procedures to protect sensitive business information. There are a few ways that we'll do that. One, to protect the confidential information, we will be working with an independent third party. That party will be the one that's gathering the data and will keep the data. Metro will not have access to the cost data from the individual companies. The third party will hold the data, will aggregate the data, and that's what we will see. The Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, just did a very similar cost of service study with the material recovery facilities. They're also private facilities that have never been regulated in the same way their rates regulated or had to share information. They were able to work with that industry group and develop confidentiality procedures that were acceptable to that group so that they could move forward with the cost of service studies. So again, as Jenna said, this has been done. It's a fairly common practice. The results of the project, is that council will be provided with a report of findings, which will include the aggregated costs and the aggregated cost per ton for wet waste transfer at the privately owned transfer stations. The intent, as we've said, as Jenna has said, is that this information will provide further information to advance the 2030 Regional Waste Plan goal, including Goal 14, as well as decisions related to the Systems Facilities Plan, the Tonnage Allocation Program, and even the Recycling Modernization Act rulemaking. And we have gone before the Regional Waste Advisory Committee. They will continue to be involved with this process. We'll go back to them to let them know what council's decision is for today, and then we'll come back to them as we move through the process of developing the report. So that is the end of our presentation, and we want to open it up for discussions, find out if you have any questions about the information and how you feel about the staff recommendation.
Wonderful, thank you for the presentation. Colleagues, questions?
Just a point of question, there's room for public testimony?
Correct, this is questions for
This is
for
just questions at
panel.
this point, but will we have an opportunity to discuss after that?
Yes,
Okay,
and we can even bring them back up.
okay.
I'm gonna go Counselor
Yep.
Nolan, then Counselor Simpson.
Thanks, Madam President. Thanks for the presentation. Love the suit. And we have had an opportunity to visit with you a lot recently, and I think we're not done. But now I want to just get my head around as much as I can how you envision this proceeding. So I appreciate the suggestion you just made at the end about about only seeing aggregated data. And I am familiar with that technique. I want to state, though, that your reference to cities and counties and DEQ doing this kind of thing has some applicability, but I don't think it's exactly analogous, because I don't think DEQ offers the services that it is regulating, nor do I think cities and counties, especially in waste transfer or hauling, offer the services that they're regulating. Whereas Metro is in this spot where we perform transfer services, and in fact, at least in my perspective, as we're talking about a facilities plan that could envision Metro developing additional capacity, I see a potential conflict of interest that would be hard to be completely divorced from. Just perspective on that. I also am wondering about how this will play into WPEZ's work to reduce long-term waste to landfill. We have enough capacity in the region already for the waste that's being produced. If we're going to be true to and successful with a goal of reducing that total aggregate tonnage, where does this all lead in terms of more facilities, less garbage, squeezing our own operations and squeezing private investors who've invested in a system that serves their customers well? So that's the first question, and then I have one follow-up.
So you touched on a number of different things. So I will try and respond and let me know, and I'll look to Holly and Jenna if I miss anything. The first comment was around Metro existing in the system with private competitors and data. So first on the data portion of it, our data is already publicly available. So I feel like that our information is already out there and would be a part of that study. We would be willing to provide more detailed information beyond the aggregate costs than I think the private transfer stations did in the design of the study. But I think that design would be that conversation would be a component of how that overall study is designed.
And I think we can look at that at the next step, but that's not the point I was trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that Metro is in a role of having to do competing, almost conflicting roles of competing for the business, as it were, while regulating its competitors.
So I think that is a question that we will be exploring as a part of the systems facilities plan and Metro's role, but I think it's important to call out Metro's overall responsibility for planning and managing the system as a public entity. And it was in the 1990s when Metro allowed private transfer stations to enter the marketplace because it was in the best interest for the public to do so. And I think Holly called attention to the valuable services that private transfer stations make. Although we exist in the same marketplace as private competitors, it's important to note that we provide a public good, such as public self-haul, that many of our private stations do not provide because it's not profitable. So I think that is loose to say that, Metro is a competitor in the marketplace because we operate 7 days a week, 6 to 7 days a week at both of our transfer stations. If we wanted to be a competitor, we would make changes to those. We would not accept certain particular materials that were not profitable. So I think there's a specific role that Metro plays that's different. In addition, we also provide more of a level playing field for smaller haulers that might not be part of vertically integrated companies to be able for them to access affordable disposal options throughout the region. Does that answer your question?
It attempts to
Provides
make your
response.
case, but I don't think it answers my question. But we can move
Yeah,
that
I think
online.
it would be a good conversation to further have around
should.
Metro's role in the system's facilities plan. But from a department perspective, what we feel this study offers us is data. We want to make decisions on the system's facilities plan, on the goal-based tonnage allocation plan, based on good information. And right now, we don't have information to be responsive to to the stakeholder requests that we're getting. So absence of that, we're using publicly available data, and that has led to programs that we are hearing from stakeholders are insufficient, specifically around the goal-based tonnage allocation program.
So on that point, do you not know what the private transfer stations charge?
No. I mean, we know what they charge, but we don't know why there are differences in charges for like services. Holly could probably
Yeah,
speak to that.
for example, one of the transfer stations last year was charging 15% more than Metro's rate for, it appears, the same services. So we don't understand what is underneath those charges. Why do they need to charge more? There may be very valid reasons for that do tie into the tonnage allocation program or other policy decisions. We can't make those policy changes or make those decisions without understanding what are those costs. And also the stations are all very different. We have we have companies that are vertically integrated that are running 3 transfer stations and 3 that are not vertically integrated. They're very different business models and different business models in how they allocate costs. So even within the privates, it's not apples to apples as well. So those are the things that we're trying to understand in order to provide consistent rates across the region to achieve goal 14. Like I heard you say that you see it as a conflict of interest if we understand what those costs are. And I think that's coming from thinking that we are directly competing. But within transfer of garbage, it's really not a competitive market. There's only so much garbage, and the transfer stations are located geographically to be able to transfer that material efficiently. So if someone on the west side of the region all of a sudden dropped their rates to 0, the transportation costs to move that garbage from the east side to the west side may not have that pencil out. So it's not this, when you think of a competitive market, it's a different beast than that. So I hear what you're saying with conflict of interest, but I think to take a step back and sort of look at that within the marketplace.
You're correct that we have a lot more to talk about, but Madam Chair, I will defer to others for the time being.
I want to ask your follow-up?
Deputy Councilor Lewis, I was going to touch on the waste reduction part of Councilor Nolan's question because I don't want that to get lost. So if I may, Councilor Nolan, I think that this actually benefits your potential goal if you want to really think about
Our goal?
Well, Metro's goal, but you brought up the question, so I will attribute it to you. But if waste reduction is a goal and we want to and you're saying that the field for commercial wet waste is stacked, right? And we do a rate review and we see all the cost of service studies and we better understand the rates and you get down the road in a systems facility plan, you could say, guess what? Metro Council has the decision, and I really hope no one from South or Central is watching this because they might not like this. You all could make the decision to stop accepting wet waste if you wanted to, and stop accepting wet waste from certain providers. So it could be self-haul and smaller businesses and not your big commercial haulers. Or you could focus on more recycling or reuse facilities. There are a lot of different ways that could play out. if you have this data as well. It could be a justification for reuse. So I'll say that, and hopefully I don't get any angry emails from the superintendents from both of our transfer stations.
Send them my way. Although that's not what I'm proposing.
No, I just, to meet that goal, there might be justification in the data that could justify less of Metro in the wet waste business.
Counselor, follow-up? I'm enjoying this.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but I'll lay it out there anyway. Is curbside service available to every property in the MSD?
Counselor Nolan, define available.
If I own a property within the Metro's boundary, can I get garbage picked up at my curb?
I think hypothetically, yes, depending on the franchise areas.
It's offered, but it's not required in
Yeah.
every jurisdiction. So we set the regional service standard for single family and multifamily, which sets out what collection services must be available. But residents aren't required to, residents and
I'm not
businesses,
asking
yeah,
about
aren't
that,
required
although
to
that
provide
is
it. But it
something I
is
hope we consider.
Yep, that's part of this. Two of the things
Because-
that you just named are scenarios in the system facilities plan. The first one is around the no-build scenario, includes setting requirements for everyone to be required to have service, which would then reduce the, theoretically, the flow to facilities because they would be receiving the curbside service.
And this may be a question for our finance folks, and I
Brian's in the
see
room.
Brian here.
Tucked off.
As we look at cost of service in our own property and our own facilities, central and south, how do we account for the value of the properties and the operation to the region as a whole? Neither of our facilities pays property taxes, which means we're subsidizing them. We and the school districts and the cities and the counties are all subsidizing them. And I would say the same extends for income taxes, that we don't pay income taxes on the operations. So remind me how, and I know you've reviewed this with me before, but it seems evasive or elusive to me to really get it.
Councilor Nolan, that is an excellent question. For the record, I'm Brian Kennedy, he, him pronouns, Chief Financial Officer at Metro. In our fee setting process, we don't specifically look at the value, the land value or revenue, tax revenues that could be generated by the facility if it were in a different use. That's not typically a part of public sector rate setting processes. I think the part of the way we account for that is through the community enhancement fee that is assessed on every ton of garbage that runs through the facilities. But we don't, there's not a fee in lieu payment, for example, from Central and South to the other governments that might impose taxes if the facilities were owned and operated by a private sector entity.
Thanks. Great, thank you. Counselor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis. That is a lot to say. I appreciate your presentation, Director McGuire, Jenna, Holly. And I really love the line of questioning we just went down. I would like to ask, as we do this evaluation of private transfer stations and private businesses, that we, with what was just discussed, also do alongside comparative rates of our public facilities so that we are being super clear and transparent, not only with our private industry folks, but also just the public at large. And as we think about a third-party expert, I'd be curious to hear or know about folks that are out there that have worked with government entities that regulate, operate alongside private facilities. and kind of some examples that they've done, so.
Holly, so for the first one, absolutely, we would be committed to providing our comparative our costs alongside with the private transfer stations, and then I would let Holly take that second one.
What was the question?
Do the third-party experts that you're looking at,
Mhm.
have they worked with government entities that regulate and operate alongside private facilities?
Yes. As Jenna said when we started out, this is a really common, it is a really common practice to do a cost of service study. So we will be hiring a firm that's got that experience working with the public sector and the private. One of the companies that we're looking at actually has just recently worked with DEQ to do a cost of service study for the material recovery facilities in the region to establish fees for the Recycling Modernization Act. So that company's got an understanding of our system, the private facilities, and then just completed a study for a public sector entity. So, yeah.
Yes. And just real quick, I just thought about this while I was here. We did a drop in 2017 of our rates and how our true cost of service. And then we had COVID, so that interrupted. Will we, as we look at back in time and do this rate comparison, will we also go back and look in the COVID years and how we operated as well?
This study is really focused on, what we're asking is focused on doing a cost of service study for the private transfer stations. Comparing to our rates would be an add-on, and I would look to others to address how far we would go back or how we would do that.
I mean, I would think, we would be very clear and transparent. So, we did the last one in 2017,
Right.
so everything between 2017 and now should be
Yeah.
available to the public.
And so do you think your questions got answered?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
I want to hop in and just add a little bit of clarity. My hope will be that we disaggregate between South and Central. I've looked at public budgets for nearly 20 years now. Ours is transparent, but it's not clear. And if we actually want to do what we're asking our private partners to do, we need to actually have one column for Central and one column for South. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Yeah, I'll agree with that comment. I think that's important. I have a question that's going to deal with disaggregation. Sort of a general principle is, as you know, as a public entity, we're first responsible to the people in our district and then their representatives, particularly the small cities, which are, in a sense, our clients. It's a public trust, but we're also responsible for not unfairly and adversely affected business, because one of our goals is for, growing a steady and stable economy. I'm particularly glad that you mentioned the issue. One of the issues I was particularly concerned about is confidentiality on the part of the private records, and such that keeps them safe from their competitors, and us, I suppose, in a sense, if they consider us competitors, because it's not quite the same. But I appreciate that confidentiality aspect, and I think that that's very, very important. You also pointed out, and I think very clearly, that the business model for a vertically integrated versus a local versus ourselves as a wet waste hauler or a wet waste receiver are very different. We have certain benefits that they don't have. We have certain kinds of tax benefits that they don't have. So I think these are things to keep in mind. That said, my question has to do with, and it has to do with another disaggregation. Will we be, when we look at these cost of services, will we be disaggregating self-haul or small-scale haul from wet waste, commercial haul from materials recycling aspects?
This study is only looking at wet waste.
Only looking at wet waste.
Waste transfer, because it is as our local governments have said, the cost for wet waste transfer, garbage disposal, is one of the key elements that they use in setting the collection rates for residents and businesses. So we're only looking at that piece. We're not looking at self-haul or some of the other services.
Okay, so that we'll be asking, if we proceed, we'll be asking the private haulers to disaggregate their data. They may charge a rate based upon a sort of an aggregated kind of approach, and we will be asking them potentially to disaggregate that and just deal with the wet waste aspect.
That's right, and that the part of the process of bringing our stakeholders to the table, the private transfer stations as well as local government, with this third party will be to design that cost study. What are the costs? How do they allocate the costs? So that we'll be working together with our stakeholders to design the study. And that'll be the first deliverable is the study design, and then we'll implement the study. So, yeah, yes.
Okay. And one other, I guess, a follow-up question. It's been expressed to me that there is some concept of identifying what might be considered a model facility and what the cost should be. Does that have any, is that something that will be looked at, or is that something that has any potential value?
We did that when we did step 2. There's a report that was written that covers the process that Metro went through to estimate the costs in 2019. Page 4 of that study talks about some of the limitations of developing a model to estimate costs. So by definition, a model is based on publicly available information. It's based on estimates. And then particularly in this case, as I said, there are some fundamental differences between the private transfer stations, the vertically integrated versus the partially integrated. And what a model does is it glosses over those differences because it's, kind of going for something that can be applied to all. So you really miss those nuances and getting the actual better estimates to really understand. So we did do this. A model was created, and looking at that report again, page 4 just goes into some more detail of some of the limitations of taking that approach.
Councilor Rosenthal, we can share that report with you after this meeting, so you can take a look at it as well.
Okay.
And we could share it with all of council if folks are interested.
And then one point that I would add, if council chooses to move forward with a cost of service study, we can build into that process, bringing back the as Holly mentioned, the first step is the design, sort of working with the industry and stakeholders to design the study. We could bring that design back to council to ensure that it's meeting your needs and the outcomes of this work.
Okay.
Okay, Counselor Wong, we are going to go to you for a question. Then we are going to do public communication. And folks, don't go too far away, because then we're going to have more discussion. But question here.
Great, thank you, Deputy President. I understand our role here is to, maximize the public good as a regulator and agency. And I'm wondering, in the previous kind of policy frameworks, was the intent that we should have regionally consistent fees? And what I'm hearing today is, some transfer stations are 6% less, some are 15% more. I guess, can you help explain our role as a regulator, why won't we want to dig so much more deeply into that? Different parts of a region just have different expenses. If I'm, in the housing sector, some places might be more affordable than others. So what is the thing that we're hoping to accomplish through this study? And, if we do the study and we find it reasonable that some people charge less and some people charge more, what then is that next action? What is the purpose of the study? Are we trying to get everyone to the same rate? Are we just trying to make sure it's fair? What?
Counselor Wong, that's a good question. And so I will say, what is the goal after this study and what council chooses to do with it is really yours to decide. I think this happened at the very beginning of the meeting, so I'll reiterate this. Metro Council already has the authority to regulate rates if they so chose. And you all do not do that for the private sector. You could do that. We're not saying that this cost study will tell you to do it. But based on the data, you can make a decision to make it that way or not. Based on the nuances and the different things and knowing that we have different types of public transfer stations, not just all vertically integrated, not all just smaller local companies, and what makes sense. I will step back a little bit and talk about your other question that is inherent in this. It's, so where are we getting some of this policy direction, right? So the transfer station configuration policy was really us trying to look at the private and the public system, the public-private system, and what would make the most sense and how do we create stability in that system, right? Because we know that our private stations provide service and help fill gaps across the region for residents. And so out of the transfer configuration policy back in 2016 came the first part of tonnage allocation, where we actually allocated tons so that people had surety in their bottom line. Later, when we got goal 14 from the regional waste plan, was that the regional waste plan seeks to advance the adoption of rates that are reasonable, responsive to user economic needs, regionally consistent, and well understood. And out of that then came the goal-based tonnage allocation. And so trying to get things that were regionally consistent was where we took Metro's rate and we said, if you match it, you get more tons, which means you get more business. And so that may or may not be working out, because as we've said a couple of times during this, the private and public is not necessarily apples to apples. So it's really, this cost of service study is getting at the goal 14 last part of that goal, which is rates that are well understood. And then we can start applying different levers, and Metro Council can apply different levers of what they do with that information to make it either regionally consistent or reasonable, responsive to like the economic users or economic needs of users, right? So you can balance those different things when it comes to rates. But you have more authority than you are currently exercising right now. But before you make that decision of what you want to do with that authority, keep it status quo, do something new, do something that is on no one's bingo card, like the last couple of years since 2020. This is the base level of just trying to understand what's going on with rates.
Thank you, team. Don't go too far, but I'm going to ask for y'all to take seats. And Connor, can you please give us order of operation for public comment?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Council President Lewis. So we'll now be taking public comment on this item. Once again, public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which depending on your version of Zoom is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. If you're here in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. And for those joining on Zoom, I'll promote you up to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll rejoin and be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, councilors, we've had some folks sign up in advance today. So first up, we have Tom Eggleston, and on deck is Peter Brandom. So Tom, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon, Deputy Council President Lewis and members of the Metro Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Tom Eggleston. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Solid Waste and Recycling Division Manager for Washington County. I'm here today to provide testimony from Washington County in support of staff's recommendation on item 6.1, private facility rate transparency. As expressed in a letter sent to your council on October 17th, the Washington County Board of County Commissioners urges your council to continue forward and conduct a full detailed rate review of private waste transfer stations, providing our community members and decision makers with the information necessary to support solid waste collection and disposal rates and fees is paramount to responsibly managing our shared solid waste system. As your partner in the solid waste system, Washington County conducts an annual rate review of garbage and recycling collection services. We evaluate revenues received and expenses incurred by our franchise service providers, confirming actual expenses, the reasonableness of those expenses, and an appropriate level of profit for our private providers. This review ensures that our community members are paying fair, just, and reasonable rates for essentially utility-like collection services. The county relies on you as our partner in the system to maintain transparency and prudency in the disposal fees being charged to our community members and our service providers. We believe the Metro Council should proceed with this rate review because it will deliver transparency, good governance, valuable data, and more equitable outcomes for our Washington County community members. We've appreciated Metro's efforts to bring transparency to the public facilities, fees, and rates, and we encourage you to bring that same level of transparency to private fees and rates. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Connor, next.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Brandom, and on deck is Kristen Leichner. And Kristen, if you'd like, you can take a seat now. All right. Peter, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Deputy President Lewis and Metro Councilors. My name, for the record, is Peter Brandom. I'm City Manager of City of Cornelius. Our mayor submitted written testimony earlier this week on this topic, and I thank you for the opportunity to weigh in today. I've been a vocal advocate for what your staff are recommending for many years in my prior work with your WPES team, going all the way back to 2010 and prior. We feel that this action is long overdue, and we appreciate you are considering it. Why is it needed? It is about good governance and to address an inequity in the regional solid waste system. We understand and appreciate that the private operators in our public system may not be interested in transparency in their rate setting, but we feel strongly that there is no difference in the need to set rates transparently for curbside collection, which we have done for decades, and for other system fees. It is what we do in cities. We also agree with the private operators who operate within our public system that the costs between the public and private transfer stations are different. Although I have discussed directly with private operators in general terms what the differences are, sitting here today, those differences are mostly mysterious. We feel strongly that all fees assessed on our community members and businesses in this public system should be set with transparency, which Metro strives to do for the public facilities. We agree that Metro should have access to all cost and revenue data of the private facilities. If costs and revenues justify the fees, okay. If they do not, the private operators should have to answer for that, just as private collection companies have had to do so for many years. In Cornelius, it is not reasonably feasible for material to be transferred at a public facility. Asking individuals or haulers to drive 40 miles to Metro South or 30 miles to Metro Central with the inherent traffic is simply not fair, and it is not equitable, let alone other public services offered at the Metro facilities, such as household hazardous waste, collection, and Metro Paint. Therefore, the nearest private facility is the only reasonable option. Both self-haul and curbside material is significantly more expensive to take there than at the Metro facilities. If this was justified, then we could work to address why the cost was higher. Right now, it is entirely unjustified and has been for decades. This is simply not right. Cornelius has among the lowest, if not the lowest, incomes and property values in the region. This issue must be addressed from an equity standpoint. We are not opposed to profit. In fact, profit is crucial to our economy. But fees for public services must be justified. Almost done. Cities do this across the board for all fees that we assess. Garbage and recycling services are no different. Please take the necessary steps through the resolution presented to you today to conclusively assess annually, in addition, rates charged by all who operate in the regional solid waste system. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Kristen Leichner, and on deck is Turnell Gunn. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Kristen Leichner. I'm the Vice President of Pride Recycling Company, a woman-owned private transfer station in Sherwood. So I recognize that there is a desire for more transparency in the transfer station rates, both in the private and the public side. All of the private transfer stations that receive wet waste allocation have been working together on this topic and others, as you may know from several memos that we've all sent to Council. We have unified goals and concerns on this rate transparency project, and we've committed to working on these issues as a group. I've previously voiced concerns about Metro's tip fee being used as a benchmark in the region. Private businesses have expenses that Metro does not have, and our economies of scale are very different due to our tonnage caps. We have less tons to spread our fixed costs across. And historically, regional system fee reserves and operational reserves have been blended by Metro, which means regional system fee money may be subsidizing operational costs and vice versa. As of July 1st, those reserves will be kept separate, but existing reserves that are already blended means there is still a risk of subsidizing across the two funding sources until that reserve amount is drained. This is one of the reasons I've pushed for more transparency in Metro's fee setting process, and it is my understanding that there will now be a rate committee formed, which I greatly appreciate. Prior to this agenda topic being brought to our attention earlier this month, our facility group was doing our due diligence on this topic. We have retained consultants to investigate what a reasonable rate for wet waste in the region is, so we can look at what the cost would be for a hypothetical transfer station in the Portland area. This will allow us to illustrate general costs of service without sharing our individual proprietary company information. Our current system is a little bit messy because while Metro regulates my facility, you also do compete against my facility and limit the amount of tons that I can bring in when I have capacity for far more than I receive. With my hauling company, Pride Disposal, I do share very detailed financial company information with our cities and the county. They use that data to set our rates, but the difference is they do not then drive down the street and try and collect garbage from our customers and compete against us. And I understand from staff that the goal may be to keep this information confidential, but recently in the region, public records requests were made that required 2 of our cities to disclose haulers' confidential financial information, so it is difficult for me to believe a similar situation may not occur with this project. My company currently does match Metro's tip fee, which we're required to do in order to receive our maximum tonnage allocation, but doing so has hurt us because it has reduced our rate of return, and our rate of return are our reserves, which we use to reinvest in our company by upgrading to electrical equipment and expanding our facility to better be able to divert waste from the landfill. And Goal 14 of the Regional Waste Plan has been discussed a lot today, and I do appreciate Councilor Huang's comments about the differences in costs across the region. And I think it's important to recognize that within the collection system, we do have consistent rates, but they are not exactly the same. The rate you may pay for service in Forest Grove is different than Sherwood, is different than Portland, is different than Troutdale, and there's a variety of factors that go into that. So while the rates are consistent, they do vary like they do at the transfer stations. So thank you for your time today. I do recognize there is a need for more transparency. I'm just offering that there is more than one way to achieve that goal. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Ternell Gunn, and on deck is Cindy Rogers.
Hi, I'm Terrell here at Greenway Recycling. Very quickly, investment and innovation at Greenway. We received $720,000 from you guys. Our system is running. Our recovery rate is about 50 to 51%. That's 2.5 times that at Hillsborough, and anywhere from 4 to 15 times the rest of the facilities in the system. Thank you for the support. I do appreciate it. With regard to the current subject, I pay taxes of about 30 cents a mile to offset the damage my garbage trucks do to I-84 heading east. When Metro's garbage heads out 84, no taxes are paid, nor are they calculated in Metro's tip fee. The damage is still done, and instead of the customer paying the bill, my friend Bill Black, who lives in Paisley, and every other Oregonian pays that bill. Similarly, Metro's tip fee does not include property taxes, personal property taxes, cat tax, nor even the amortized cost of the new wheel loaders and excavators recently purchased for Metro South. The truth of the matter is, though, somebody has to pay those bills. Prior to comparing Metro's rate to those of private facilities, Metro's rate must be adjusted to reflect real-world cost. Otherwise, there is no basis for accurate comparison and no point in looking at private facility books. Yesterday, I did a little math and came up with an adjusted Metro tip fee, not $137.50, but $144.81, which is probably pretty close to what Mr. Kennedy would come up with should you ask him to do that. Then I looked up Forest Grove's rate, just about 25 cents higher than that. I was really surprised about that. And I didn't see any need to address the transportation cost disadvantage due to location, nor profitability concerns or any of that. It was clear to me the pricing's reasonable. I ask you to direct Brian Kennedy to prepare a transparent conversion of Metro's tip fee to include those real costs paid by private facilities that are not currently calculated in Metro's tip fee. Compare this to our rates, and I think you will arrive at the same conclusion I have. The private facilities are the best deal out there, and there is no need nor purpose in analyzing their confidential finances. A lot of money has been spent buying land and preparing to build hundreds of millions of dollars of transfer stations based upon nothing but faulty math. Please do the correct math and make the right decisions based upon real cost and facts. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we now have Cindy Rogers, and I'll just remind folks that if you would like to sign up now to testify, you can do so by hitting the raise hand button or by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room.
Good afternoon, Deputy Council President Lewis and councilors. My name is Cindy Rogers. I'm the Municipal Manager for Republic Services. Metro's goal to create rates that are reasonable, regionally consistent, and well understood through the 2030 Regional Waste Plan, Goal 14, is not working because it fails to recognize three things. First, Metro's rates are subsidized by the regional system fee, therefore not a good representation of what is reasonable when compared to other transfer stations in the region. Second, a transfer station's allocations of fixed and variable costs per ton vary significantly depending upon the number of tons Metro allocates to that facility. Third, facilities and locations have variable costs that must be incorporated into the tipping fee. Metro's own transfer stations are subsidized through all tons generated within the Metro region by blending funds from the regional system fee. Metro staff acknowledge that they will now separate the actual regional system fee monies used to cover the operating costs for its stations, but have not committed to abstain from using the funds to pay for capital improvement projects. A private company does not have access to these funding sources to lower their gate rates. Metro staff have publicly acknowledged that they would not be able to operate Metro's facilities based on the tipping fee alone. So we need to ask, what are the real costs used to determine Metro's tipping fees? Before Metro decides about the reasonableness of the private company's tipping fees, Metro should consider what costs are currently incorporated in those fees. To meet Metro's goal of transparency, the industry has already started compiling information to create a model that will provide insight into the actual cost for a private company to run a facility. This information should provide council with the insights in how 6 facilities generate individual rate structures. We highly encourage council to delay consideration of the resolution providing funding for the cost of service study of private transfer stations until, 1, staff has a better understanding of what will happen when the region system fee is not blended with the other funds for a term of at least 1 year, providing the real costs and required rates at its own public stations. We can provide transparency by providing the council with a private transfer station model based on real data. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Council President Lewis, councilors, that is everybody who has signed up so far to testify. And I don't see any other hands up in either our virtual or physical audience.
Giving it one more second. Anybody else? You can fill out a blue card later. Come on forward.
Yeah. And please just identify yourself for the record before starting.
Good afternoon, councilors. My name is Eben Polkin. I am the Solid Waste and Recycling Manager at the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I've been appreciating the conversation here this morning and now afternoon, and just simply wanted to draw your attention to a letter that we submitted to you yesterday afternoon. All city councilors at Portland expressed support for continuing forward with the cost of service study. So just wanted to draw that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Something everybody in Portland agrees on. Okay. Counselor Nolan. Oh, wait, Evan, come back. You gotta follow up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. And actually, this question goes to you, and if there's a different answer from Cornelius or Washington County, I'd appreciate it. I've initiated and conducted or received lots of transparency reports in my career. But I'm curious about how far your commitment or your support for transparency goes when City of Portland, you may not do construction or let other large contracts, but I bet Cornelius and Washington County do. Do you, when you're either designing a roadway project or a park improvement or whatever, do you ask for the books of the design team that you are, when you ask for bids on that, or if you put out a request for information or a request for interest? What I'm trying to do is figure out where the line is about if I hire an architect to design something for me, if I hire a construction company to build something for me, do I get into their payroll? Do I get into how much they pay their CEO? Do I get into where they buy their equipment?
Thanks, Councilor Nolan. That's a helpful question. I had an incidents recently where we had a contractor provide a quote for some work, and there was a long blank table, but just one line at the top that said 1 unit project and cost, and it was in the several thousands. And my response was, can you give us a little more detail? And there wasn't a response. And so I think to answer your question, we do ask for quite a lot of detail at that level of things, whether it's a request for quotations, request for proposals. And if we feel like there's not enough detail to really understand the cost involved in doing the work, then we will seek more details from someone else, and that's what we did in that case.
It is on, sorry. Same thing. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councilor Nolan. I can't necessarily speak directly to road bidding projects at the county. I work in the solid waste division, but I do understand that the county goes through a competitive solicitation and procurement process for large contracts. So I think that's kind of the mechanism that's being used in that situation. I think what's a really important difference for our solid waste system, especially in Western Washington County, is even though there's not a regulatory flow control to certain private facilities, the way the system is structured geographically is there's no realistic alternative. So our service providers are not really given a open competitive choice on what facility they drive to. If you're collecting waste in and around the city of Cornelius, the Forest Grove transfer station is where you're gonna take your waste. You're not gonna drive it into Central, South, or even down to Sherwood for the Pride facility. So that's kind of the limitation.
No, but someone's gonna drive it there to the ultimate landfill, right?
Yeah, it's a transfer, yeah.
Someone's gonna pay for that. Anything to add?
I think my colleague from Washington County kind of covered what I would say, which is simply that this system involves automatic allocations, and because of the allocation process and geography, transfer is not a competitive service. We're not soliciting for competitive bids for that service. Instead, this is more like a essential public utility. And when a private company is being awarded essentially automatic amount of the market. Typically, the public sector approach to that is to look at the books and make sure that those costs are reasonable.
I think I might edify that a bit because our allocation process is not automatic. It's based on performance. Goals that we have said we want the private transfer stations to achieve, including meeting our rates. So it's not exactly.
There's some modification.
It's not exactly a franchise utility.
Deputy Council President, if I could just refine that a little bit. There is automatic allocation. A subset of the total tons that are allocated are awarded by these criteria, where we're trying to encourage certain behaviors. But there is also just a base tonnage that is allocated.
Fair point.
Thank you.
And just to draw a finer point on that, Metro retains 40% of the waste. 60% is allocated to the private stations. Of that 60%, 30% is distributed equally, and the remaining 30% is based on the goals that they choose to apply for.
And while we're speaking about goals, I'm concerned that we may be misreading or assigning significance to the signal of applying for tonnage based off of the fee match or not, when that may not actually be a competitive factor based on the timing. So until we get that right, I still have more questions on if that's really a signal or frankly, if it might be some noise right now while we haven't achieved liftoff fully of those goals. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just a sort of historical note. When I first came on the council, that we were first debating the idea of the four criteria for load allocation. And I always thought at that time that basing it on the metro rate, load allocation on the metro rate was sort of an odd thing because it is really apples and oranges because the business models are very different for private and for metro facilities. I think we should look at it. I mean, the other four all seemed reasonable and there was quite wide acceptance of those. I was actually quite surprised that so many private facilities actually bought into that rate structure, that portion, but in retrospect, it sort of looks like an experiment that actually didn't work. So, because like you say, there's different kinds of businesses and there are different kind of business structures, so there's different factors. And so I think, I guess, I'm sort of supportive of the fact that we may need more information to correct that that assumption error at that point in time. We thought it would be simple, but I don't think it's not quite that simple.
That's a really good point, Councilor Rosenthal. When the metro rate was selected, because we understand the costs of the public transfer stations. We don't currently understand the costs of the private transfer stations. And because we lack that information, we can't set a different rate. We don't have any other information. And so that's one of the things this cost of service study will do. We understand, hearing from the private transfer stations, they are all different and they do all have different costs and different pressures. We don't understand those. So that's part of what this information will help inform, is the evaluation of the tonnage allocation program and really looking at that and should that rate be adjusted. But we can't do that unless we have that information.
And we are planning to begin the evaluation of the tonnage allocation program this year. And we see this as a key data point in proposing updates to that program.
Just a quick follow-up. Several of the points that were made was that we have changed one of the ways in which we allocate, particularly to our reserves. And will we be able to make an estimation of how that's going to affect our rate structure?
I'm gonna let Brian answer that.
We've now separated these, and there was the comment was, well, we don't really know how we should wait because we don't really know how that's going to affect things. The question is, can we make an estimate of that?
Councilor Rosenthal, That's a good question. I would note, I would disagree with a number of the assertions that were made in those comments, particularly how our fees are affected by the regional system fee. In terms of setting our operating fees, the regional system fee does not directly subsidize transfer station operations. Our fee model is very clear in breaking out those costs separately. The one issue was around our reserves, because we operate one solid waste utility, and we have not tracked those reserves separately. Those reserves primarily are used for investing in capital improvements, and I would note that the capital assets in the Metro's solid waste functions include activities supported by both the regional system fee and transfer station operations. So the RID Deployment Center, significant property purchase there is a regional system fee backed purpose, and it's entirely appropriate to use reserve funds generated from the regional system fee for purchase of those facilities. Our other primary facilities, the transfer stations, include both transfer station operations and regional system fee activities, primarily the household hazardous waste function. So really the only remaining question is, of our existing reserves, those were generated over a long period of time by a combination of our transfer station operations and regional system fee. We don't think it is a useful exercise to go back over the last 25 years and separate those out, particularly since those capital reserves are a relatively small portion of our overall reserves in the solid waste fund. And we will spend those down in the next year to 18 months. And so going forward, we will directly allocate capital investments that are paid for by reserves from the specific subfund from which they were generated. So I guess I'm happy to take any additional questions on that.
Okay, elephant in the room is that we have 3 minutes before our traditional end time. This is the highest level conversation we've had on this. I'm gonna ask colleagues, can everybody go 10 minutes over today?
I don't know. I'm not in charge of my own time.
I'm scared for you, but I'm gonna keep us here for 10 more minutes, and we're gonna cancel 7 and 8 today. But let's keep going. Counselor Wong, and then Counselor Nolan.
Great. First, I'd like to read a statement from Councilor Gonzalez for the record, if that's okay.
Sure.
And I do have a question of my own. But due to a travel arrangement, Councilor Gonzalez is unable to join our work session today and wishes to share that he appreciates all the engagement we've received on this important topic, many of which are partners in his district. Councilor Gonzalez supports a healthy garbage and recycling ecosystem that best meets the needs of a public and appropriately balances costs with services. He understands that the Metro Council plays a critical role in determining that services are fairly priced for all users, and is optimistic that the roundtable is organized by the WPAS staff will deliver important recommendations to the council. And he expresses sincere appreciation for both the public and private partners that help the region address our climate and regional waste plan goals. Most importantly, Councilor Gonzalez is supportive of transfer station rate transparency and supports staff moving forward with the study.
Thank you. Sorry, you drew the short straw and had to read.
No problem.
Let's do your question, then Counselor Nolan's question.
Okay. Yeah. My question is really around kind of the phase 2 of the study that was already done with the hypothetical. And I have seen some of the testimony and letters that sort of want us to go down that path again, to look at kind of blended or hypothetical or exemplar scenarios. And my question is like, what was insufficient in the phase 2 that prevents us from using that data from that phase, where we have to dive more deeply? And I'm just trying to balance kind of the privacy concerns, recognizing that different transfer stations operate differently, but like, what is it that we can do to increase transparency while meeting kind of these other goals? And why would the exemplar or hypothetical not not be sufficient in this round?
So the step two is based on a limited set of publicly available information. The Metro staff interviewed the private transfer stations and they did site visits, but were not able to actually get any cost data or financial information. And based on, that limited set of public data, then having to make assumptions on top of that, and then make estimates that then are never actually verified. Like, they did run the estimates by the private transfer stations, but got really no information back on whether or not that they were correct based on actual costs. Again, in doing that kind of a study, they created a model. And you create a model when you lack actual data and you're using assumptions and you're using estimates. And again, in this case, and they gloss over the differences with these businesses. And we have some really marked differences when you have a vertically integrated company that can put costs in a number of different areas and overhead costs and profits to one that's partially integrated. And so you really can't get a good picture of what's happening. There were, and again, I think I did not do the study. Folks in our analytics team did it and can speak in more detail. But again, at the very beginning of the study, it does break out what the limitations of the study were. Another thing that was missing is having to estimate profits. As somebody said, profits are a cost of service. And again, with vertically integrated, partially integrated, just the different types of companies, it was difficult to sort of tease out where are profits, where are they going, what's the overhead. So you really don't get good information. And again, we understand that these are all very different businesses. They have different pressures, there are different the costs. And this is about trying to understand those so that we can move forward and make better decisions. As Councilor Rosenthal said, maybe the public rate isn't the right rate to set to have a consistent rate across the board. Maybe it is a higher rate, but we can't make that change. We cannot bring that information to you as a council to make a different policy decision without that information.
Thank you. And then the staff recommendation, I understand you had a methodology for protecting individual companies' information.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that in that work product that we would receive through that study that we would have composite information, or is it like scrub data from like anonymized data, but we would just be able to tell that I probably know which company this is based on?
It will be aggregated information. You'll get.
It would be aggregated.
Yeah, you'll get one cost. And as we move through the process, if council directs us to do this, as we move through this process, we will come back to council at different points. As Marta said, definitely after the study design. And we also envision, again, referring to what DEQ did, they had a stakeholder group that included industry, and they worked with that group to determine what those confidentiality procedures would be. So it wasn't DEQ dictating, we'll do this. It was in cooperation with the industry, and they were able to come up with a procedure that everybody felt comfortable with. So I look at modeling that.
And in that composite, would it be multiple composites of like, this is what vertically integrated, transfer stations do, and this is what?
It will be and again, these are like some of the details we'll be working out as we develop this again with all the industry partners at the table. And we would fully support the industry folks in bringing their own accountant or expert to represent them as well. But I anticipate we'll be determining what the different cost categories are and how to allocate those costs. And so there'll be aggregated costs for those, different pieces of what it takes to transfer wet waste. For example, fuel cost.
And would the data that was collected by an independent third party, would that be subject to public records requests?
That is a lawyer question.
We'll have Shane come up.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to follow up on that one.
Pardon?
Thank you.
It's a big issue.
Good afternoon. For the record, Shane Abman with the Metro Attorney's Office, and I advise the Solid Waste Division. I believe we can structure it so that Metro does not have possession of that information, and therefore, if we don't have possession, it won't technically be a public record. We've done this in the past with other kinds of consulting arrangements in this manner where we are dealing with confidential information. I'm not sure how DEQ did it because I wasn't involved with that, but that's something else that I can look at. And also, as mentioned earlier, the hauling franchises, and they submit data as well to the cities. And there may be some confidentiality provisions there that we can follow. But I believe that we can structure to protect this information.
Okay. Thank you.
And I don't know if, Carrie, if you have any further thing to add.
I also want to just take a step back and talk a little bit about that concern, or that concern that's been raised that Metro is a competitor in the system. Transfer of wet waste, again, as I said, really doesn't function in the same way as another competitive system does. There are only so many tons of wet waste out there. They're generated geographically, and we have developed a system with both public and private where we have the privates located geographically to help efficiently move those tons that are created. Transportation is a really high cost when you're looking at this, so it's, again, to minimize those transportation costs and be as efficient as possible. Metro developed the tonnage allocation program to transparently allocate those costs across the region. That's not a competitive move. That was, we wanted to make sure that everybody had enough tons in order to operate efficiently and cover their costs. There are certain sunk costs in operating a transfer station. You got the building, you got the trucks, you got the fuel. There's certain costs, and each of those tons that come in is $1 to cover those costs. So that tonnage allocation program was to make sure that everybody had enough tons to cover their operating costs and be able to operate efficiently to serve the region. So it really is not a competitive market in the same way you think of other systems being competitive.
And I'll add one more finer point. I know we need to get to Councilor Nolan's next question. It's not competitive because we are a regulator in every sense of the word here. We control the waste stream, the wet waste streams with the tonnage allocation. But before the 1990s, we didn't allow other private transfer stations. We got all of the tons because we have the authority to say they can play in the system with us. And so just that is another awkward elephant in the room of why it's not competitive, like typically to your normal market, right? We have the authority to regulate and plan the whole system. And for a while, we were just the ones playing and getting all of the tons. And then we said, okay, yeah, you're allowed to operate here now, and we'll give you, and then later we said, you serve an important purpose, we'll give you some of our tons to make sure you have surety. And then that has continued to evolve.
Great, thank you. I want to acknowledge, even with our extended time, I don't think we are going to come up with consensus in the next few minutes. But I do want Councilor Nolan to get a question.
Madam Chair, you just made my point. I agree. I think it's not quite ready. I have open questions, and I appreciate the time people have spent with me, and I've heard from everyone on this dais questions that I would recommend we measure twice or 3 times or 4 times and only cut once.
Yeah, my hope would be that we still move towards a resolution, but with another work session between now and then. Because if you came back with the resolution, I think we'd have the entire council asking questions instead of feeling ready to vote. Another work session, please.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Colleagues, anything else? Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to hold over COO and Councilor Communication. I will adjourn our meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, October 31st. No, it's not. Thursday, November 2nd at 10:30 a.m.
Also, not that.
We'll all be out trick or treating, right?
Shoot, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Tuesday, November 7th, 10:30 a.m. That's our next meeting.
Really? Yeah, they have the housing summit next week. What?